In this video, I'm going to be painting up a whole load of Tyranid proxies to add to my Tyranid swarm. Now, I absolutely love painting Tyranids. They're just a great little army, and my colour scheme I quite like. I think it pops anyway. And when Mammoth Factory Games reached out to me and said they were planning on launching their first sci-fi set, I was like, yes, I definitely want to test those. So all of these models were 3D printed and they're part of Mammoth Factory Games' New Frontier, which is all about Tyranid and bug proxies, and they look absolutely awesome. So they sent me over a whole load of their pre-release samples so that way I could test them out and get them printed off, and they all came out real nice. Now I've got a whole bunch of Tyranid stuff back from when Leviathan came out. I ended up going a little bit mad with that and painting up a whole bunch of Tyranids. I wanted to add some more to them, and I really like the look of this set. So I set to printing, and all of these came out really, really nicely. They're all pre-supported and unsupported depending on what your preference is, and they came off very nice. The only thing to note is they are pretty much all one piece. So a lot of the larger units do come off in one piece, which is quite nice. Some of them do come out in different parts, but they're not modular. It's just so that way they fit onto pretty much any kind of print bed. So if you're looking for modular stuff, unfortunately that's not here, but there's enough poses here that you can mix them up and mirror them and stuff like that in the slicer. I had no issues when I was getting them printed. They all came off very, very nicely. Broke them all off the supports, got them all cleaned up and then thrown onto my cure station. And then it was over to the fun part, the painting. Now, my method for painting Tyranids is really simple and it's really quick as well. And you can do it quicker if you want to. You can spend a little bit more time on them as well if you want to, but it's as simple as this. So the first thing is to get them all primed with a zenithal prime. And that's basically hitting them with black all over and then a lighter color from above. Now, my lighter color was this creamy white, so that way I got that sprayed all over them. And give it a good dousing. You want to get a good amount on there because later on you want to capture some of that color. So if they look too dark at this stage, you're going to lose out a little bit. Once I've done my zenithal prime, I go for almost like a bright fleshy pink. So in this case, it's Army Painter's Air Fey Pink, which I've used on some of my Emperor's Children in the past. And it's a nice, bright, but not too bright or vivid pink. And I hit them all from below, trying to get some of those raised edges. Now you don't want to go too mad with this because otherwise they will look like Mr. Blobby. And that's not the effect we're going for. You want it to almost look like a natural pink. This is an acquired taste. Some people do not like the pink. I do. I think it looks really nice. Once I've got that on there, we're able to put aside the airbrush and move over to the painting table, which is where we get some more bright colors. Now for this, I've been using contrast paint Karandras Green, and I've been basically putting all of this onto the chitin, I believe it is, chitin. Oh, you're gonna roast me in the comments for that. But I've been putting it onto all the bony parts and the claw weapons and stuff like that. Anywhere that I wanted that to kind of blend in and get all over it. The other main color that I've been using is Caribbean Ocean, and I've been putting this onto anywhere where there's more organic parts. So some of them have almost brainy parts, and some of them have this almost muscle tendon underneath the chitin. And I think this just really contrasts nicely with the Karandras Green that we've already got. Used it on my previous Tyranids. I really like the way this came out, and I just think the combination along with that pink really starts to make them pop. Now once you've done that, I just go through and I pick out a couple of highlights. So add in some bits for the eyes. I've gone for yellow eyes, which is quite a nice little pop on there. Adding in just some extra bits of blue in around the mouth and stuff like that, just to pick out a few details that weren't necessarily there. Once that's all done, it's on to the oil wash stage. And for this, it's just a case of grab some white spirits and your chosen color in an oil. For this, I've been using this quite bright, vivid purple, mixing it all up to a nice thin consistency. You don't want to have it too thick because otherwise it's just going to get all over those top surfaces. You want it to be nice and thin so it runs into all of the areas. And the great thing about these models by Mammoth Factory Games is, just like Games Workshop Tyranids, there's loads and loads of ribbed and creviced areas and stuff like that. So there's loads of details for this to run into. Slosh it all over the models so it just gets in there nicely, seeps into all of those bony bits, and it just really adds a nice flare of pop and shadow against that pinky white that we've got above it. And it contrasts again nicely with those main colors we've been using. Leave that to dry. You want to leave it for at least 15 minutes before you start doing anything. If there's any areas where it's dried on too much, all you need to do is take that white spirit that you used earlier and dab one end of this into it and dab it onto the model, and that reactivates the paint, and then use the dry end just to wipe it all off. Once that's done, you could probably leave them all there and move on to the basing. And for all my infantry, that's basically what I did. However, for the main units and the larger ones, I started to go back in and do some highlights. And for this, I just took some lighter greens and also a yellow as well. I thinned them down to a nice consistent glaze on my wet palette and just dragged from the middle of like the swords and out to the edges. And same with all the chitin and everything else. Once I've built up all of that green and got some nice highlights, I did the same with the yellow as well, just to add a little bit more contrast in there. And I think this gives it a nice, almost tiger-esque type pattern. Probably not quite, but it just helps to add a little bit more pop to the model. Once that was done, it was on to the bases, and I used some of this contrast paint Flesh Tearers Red and sloshed it all over. To get some of the sandy mix, I used some Vallejo ground mix and popped that on some of the bases, but a lot of them are already pre-sculpted by Mammoth Factory Games, especially this one by the Queen, which looks absolutely awesome. Has all these like kind of buggy Tyranid type tendrils coming out and all these like egg sacs and stuff like that, and I think these just look really, really nice. The final thing I did before I moved on to any of the varnish stage was I added a little bit of Nuln Oil around some of the areas I wanted a bit more separation. So where I had something like that chitin, for example, and then their flesh, I wanted just to add a little bit more of a darker border just to kind of separate some of those colours. So I pin washed a little bit of Nuln Oil around the models and then I left them there. So moving across onto the varnish. For the first ones I used a gloss varnish, thinking it would give them a bit of like a wet, buggy type look, and it didn't quite work out the way that I wanted it to. They ended up just looking really, really shiny and like a toy, so I didn't like that. Instead, I went for my usual satin varnish, and I love a satin varnish because it's a really nice go-between between matte and basically that glossiness. It's a really nice go-between between them. I sprayed this all over, I got them all varnished, and then left them to dry for a few hours. I came back in and I finished off all the bases and blended them all together using some pigment powders. So for this, I used this like kind of mid-pale sand and popped it all over the bases and made sure I rubbed it onto like the legs and like the bits that are closest to the base. And this just helps to blend the model in with the base and just make it look a little bit more natural. Now, in my experience, fixing the pigment powder is actually quite easy. Just take some of that white spirit you used earlier for your oil wash and you just dab it onto where you've got the pigment powder. When you do this, the first thing you'll probably notice is it looks like your pigment powder is just melting away and it seems to just magically disappear. But once the white spirit dries off, you will get all of that back and it just miraculously returns. And the great thing is it fixes it all in place. If you use water or glue or anything like that, it turns into like a sloppy mess because ultimately it is pigment and it just turns into like a paint. And it's thick, and it's horrible, and it's goopy, so white spirit seems to work every time I use it. The only additional thing that I did for some of these models, the Queen especially, was I wanted her to look like she was rising up from all of these eggs, and she'd been there, and there was like the slime and stuff was attached. So I used some Uhu glue for that. Now I've used this in the past for like blood effect, but it works really nice for like slime and bits kind of hanging off it. All you do is take some of that Uhu glue, pop it onto like a stick or something else that you don't mind getting ruined, and just dab it onto like the claws and then drag it from where you're taking it from to where you want it to be. So for this, like dragging it from claws to other claws or from the claw to the eggs and stuff like that. And it gives this nice slimy texture that's coming off of all of the models. And once I'd done that, we were done with these models and I really, really like them. My favorite is absolutely this Queen model. I think she looks fantastic and the base I think looks absolutely amazing as well. It just helps to bring the whole model together and make it look absolutely awesome. Once I got them all onto the table, I was really, really happy with the results and they're going to make a great addition to my Tyranid horde. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you like the colours? Do you like the pink? I know, like I said, they're an acquired taste. I really like them. They're a little bit different and I just really like how they all look. And do you like any of the models from this set? Are you going to be backing any of them? If you want to, you can find my link down below for them. You can find their Frontier. It's really reasonably priced as well. So if you've got a 3D printer and you're wanting some like Tyranid proxies to go with your army, there's a lot to choose from here. There's other models that I didn't get to paint because I just ran out of time, but there's a whole lot to choose from. So thank you so much for watching this video. Hope you've enjoyed it and come along for some more 3D printing content in the future. But in the meantime, stay safe and I'll see you soon. Ta-ra!